Okay, so moving on to PE, using PE to teach students how to think critically. So we've talked in the first half about using art to teach students how to think critically. Now we're going to look at how PE, not health in this second half of the lecture, it'll be just PE. So I want you to consider how, like we did with art, I want you to consider how PE has helped you be able to think critically as well as being able to problem solve, be more creative and to be innovative in your thinking. Do you want to share?
My daughter is learning how to do netball. I've done it before when I was a kid. So watching her, the team, they're learning how to pass and, find the gap. Well, they don't find the gap, they're like this. And they follow each other. When I say to her, you have to find the gap, run around and try and find the gap so they can pass to you freely. Like I can see that as a spectator.
Yeah.
But I think they're still learning how to do that.
Yeah.
So that's problem solving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they need to know how to work as a team, open up the spaces to get it from one side of the court to the other to grab cover.
Yeah, and I think that's a developmental thing because I was talking about that in ECU300 on Friday and how it seems to be at a certain age kids are able to kind of like see the game differently and they're able to kind of understand that, if we stay in positions, we're going to have a better chance of scoring and I'm going to have a better chance of getting the ball. Whereas if we run around and we're all trying to get the ball, and it's also about, me, it's all about me, as opposed to, it's not always about me in a team game, it's about my teammates. But like as a younger age, it's kind of me, I just want the ball. And all the kids are thinking that, so they're all running like they're a magnet to the ball. So
I can see that the older children that have played the sport, for a longer period, they understand the ball and they can do it. Like AFL, boys in AFL and the rugby and stuff.
Yeah.
I can see that they're considering, like there's some children that still me.
Yeah.
Whereas there's other kids that understand it and they will share the ball to people and their teammates, I should say.
Yeah.
And, encourage it to get to where it needs to be.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like leaders, I would say, or like learning how to lose. Yeah, that's a big yeah. That is a big thing. It's not all about winning.
Yeah.
And that's why I say her as well. Even though they did win last year, the whole entire, every single game that they played, they won 2. It wasn't emphasised that they won. It was just them winning.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing sometimes in sport, where it's just, you did a good job, but it wasn't emphasised of winning. You have to learning how to play.
Yeah, and I think being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, so pointing out to kids, how do you feel when you win? You feel great. Isn't it great to win? That's great. You get that feeling. How do you think the people who lost would be feeling? And they won't know that unless they experience it for themselves. And they'll, but once they do recognise and pointing out to them, how do you think the people in the other team feel, so that they can recognise, develop empathy. And then also when they lose, how do you think, pay attention, how do you feel? You don't feel good. But that's fine to have that emotion. It's not a bad thing. And then how do you think those other people feel on the winning side? And then, so consciously making them aware of that, of empathy and being able to recognise how other people might be feeling. But then also encouraging kids to be good sports people and go and shaking hands after the game, and this is what we do when we win or lose at the end of the game. At the end of the day, it is just a game, it's just sport, it's not life or death. It's supposed to be there for fun. And where was I going with that? In terms of losing, I've completely lost my train of thought. Yeah, I'll come back to me. Anyway, so, yep.
I find the paradox of teaching critical thinking in sport is the constraints already within sport. If you tell a child you can go and do any sport activity, they'll choose something that they already know how to do. They won't be able to come up with their own movement, for example, unless it's something like dance, and even that has its own constraints. Keeping to the beat, keeping within a certain amount of time. If, for example, you're teaching them aerobics, and you say, okay, you've got a 2.5 minute piece of music, it's at 108 beats per minute, come up with an aerobics routine that will fit within that. There's the constraint there. Teaching them how to think critically, yes, they're learning the thinking of, okay, I need to do this many movements, it needs to stick within this beat, that kind of thing. That will help them in some terms of critical thinking, but I think it's always going to be within those boundaries when it comes to sport.
Yeah. Just quickly, I remember what it was. So pay attention to how people respond when you are a good sports person after losing. So pay attention to how you feel when you lose, but then go and shake hands and say well done, congratulate the people who won, and then pay attention to how they respond to you, and how that might be different to when you don't shake hands or aren't nice and polite in losing, and then paying attention to how that feels. So recognising that when you do go up and you are a good sports person and you say well done, and that person is then going to respond to you differently, and pay attention to how that feels better than being a bad sports person and losing and just storming off, and that feels worse. Kind of thing. Yeah.
Just a couple of things. When you were talking about how your opponents might feel like whether you shake hands or not, it sort of just made me think of the grand final where the Saints first. I can't remember, but they were in the grand final and it ended up in a draw. And then after all that, all the players a lot of them started crying because it was like, oh no, a draw, what's this?
Yeah.
So that was just one thing I wanted to.
There's actually, St Kilda and Collingwood.
Yeah, that's it. And just with questioning techniques, my dad was talking about Muhammad Ali the other night, and he was saying how he'd play with his opponent's head by saying exactly what he's going to do in each round. Like, oh, I'm going to knock him out in this round, and in this round I'm going to I'll do a right hook or something like that.
Yeah.
And he'd always be saying things to stir his opponents up so that they wouldn't be able to think properly.
Yeah.
So that was something I thought about when I read questioning techniques. So, yeah.
So you're kind of moving on then, because I probably shouldn't have put that dot point in that for that first one, because the next three in particular were examples of how you could develop critical thinking, problem solving, creativity and innovation. And so one example is questioning techniques, another is expressive movement. I'll talk about that more in a second, movement challenges, and then the CPET program. But questioning techniques is just more to point out about how you do question students, so using open questioning as opposed to closed questions, that sort of thing. So how did that feel, on a good, bad, and trying to stay away from those sorts of questions that lead to closed answers like yes or no, or good or bad, and asking more open-ended questions, which being like a Darwin person, for me that's easy particularly talking to another Darwin person, and I'd walk up and say, for example, or what? And then that kind of just opens for them to go, oh, okay, blah, 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 and then they just kind of open up. And being able to wait time for them to open up, and that's something that's really personally difficult for me. I say something and I want to respond straight away. But giving it, like a few seconds at least, if not 5 or 10 seconds, for people to be able to process what you're saying, think about it, and spit it out. So questioning techniques are huge, and I came across an example of something that a very successful person that does a lot of speaking does. I can't remember his name, but he talked about when you've got something that you want to, whether you're a teacher or a coach or a parent, it's the same kind of thing. essentially, and you want to get a point across, you don't even have to ask a question or scold or say anything more than one word. And so, for example, you've got someone that comes in late and they're always late to class, say, for example. And rather than getting angry on this time when you're about to burst and saying, "You're always bloody late, why are you always late?" You know, and putting them automatically on the defensive. Say, for example, punctuality, and then leave it. And and I really want to try this, and I haven't had much opportunity to try it because I only learned this about 2 months ago. And just use that one word to get your point across, whatever it might be. So late punctuality was the example that I heard, so I'm sure there's plenty of others. And it might not be right there and then, it might be after, and it's probably actually better if it is after. So you might say, you know, like when the student walks in, they're always late for your class, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it might be. And you might say, come and see me after the lesson. Chances are they're probably already going to be on the defensive from that, because they're only going to be going always, they're going to ground me, I'm going to be in trouble, I might get detention, I might make me pick up rubbish, or whatever it might be, whatever these consequences are. But use it as an educational opportunity, and instead, at the end of the lesson, when that student or child, whatever it might be that you're working with, comes up to you, just say, punctuality. And chances are you have to wait, and it'll be an uncomfortable silence. And you may even have to explain what punctuality means, so you would need to probably use a word that they would understand. So it might even be simply late or lateness, and then just see what they say. And they'll generally overcome the issue themselves, and so they, more often than not, they'll say, "Oh yeah, look, I'm really sorry that I'm late, you know, like I know it's not good, you know, I'll try and be late," but, you know, if they are someone that's not internally motivated, and they'll kind of like come up with a solution moving forward without you ever having to say anything, and in particular having to growl them. So that's what I wanted to point out with questioning techniques, is sometimes you don't even have to ask a question, you just make a statement or you say one single word and you let them kind of deal with the situation and create like a positive outcome for everyone. Expressive movement was more about creativity, and so of course dance is an example of expressive movement and being creative in that way, or being innovative in movement. But there's a bloke that I work with at the Institute of Sport who does this kind of like weird move stuff on the floor. I wanted to find a video on Instagram to show you but he's all about like functional movement, and he's super strong in every single way you could be strong, in every position physically. And he was talking to me about just like being on the ground and just, it's called float, I think it's an actual thing, and just being creative, so just moving in whatever way your body wants to move. It's like it's really weird. And he did this video.
So the kids roll around on the ground.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Wow, man. But it was funny because now the guy who was like older guy, he's 60, he was a strength and conditioning coach at Essendon Football Club and Geelong Football Club. So he's been around, he's had a lot of experience in high performance sport, and they did this video where this younger guy was doing this like, you know, it kind of looked a little bit like capoeira, and then the older guy gets on the ground and just kind of like rolls across the ground, like it's an example of expressive movement. But it doesn't, what I'm getting at is it doesn't have to be expressive movement. It isn't just dance, it can be in sport as well, in physical activity, in terms of movement competence. And that then moves into the next one of movement challenges, so giving children movement challenges. So last year, in my role with the NTIS, I was running a research project called Move More, Learn More, which I talked about. And part of that was the kids would have movement challenges. And so they would have to do, for example, like an L-sit, where they sit on against the wall with their arms up over their head, with their legs out straight, so they're in an L-shaped position at the hips. So back up against the wall and then up like that. And it's very, very difficult to do, particularly if you're trying to keep your whole back attached to the wall. A lot of kids need, and particularly adults, need to bend their knees in order to be able to do it, or they need to come away from the wall or they need to put their arms out like that to be able to get their arms up straight. So giving children movement challenges, or saying, I want you to try and do like an animal walk of some sort, it might be a crab walk or a duck walk or whatever, and getting them to figure out how to do it. So understand how their body moves, and also we would use that in terms of being able to create movement confidence. But you can use those sorts of things to get them to understand how their body moves around in space, particularly for people who are, I suppose, physically challenged. The CPET program is a program that I came across when I first started teaching at Sanderson High School at the time, and it was the best program. So it's a sport education, physical education program. That's a website which I found, which I thought explained it the best. It's not an official site, but you can Google CPET and see what comes up, or what is CPET. You can get a whole bunch of different things. This is seriously, if you're teaching physical education like a program, it's the best program in my opinion you could possibly teach, because it teaches everything. So you've got people doing officiating jobs, you've got people doing coaching jobs, you've got people in leadership positions as a captain. So for example, I did it with grade 10s. I've also done it with older primary age students and certainly with middle school students. But you can certainly do this with students who are in grade 5 or 6, I would reckon. And you could, so the way you do it is you choose a sport and you do it for 5 to 10 weeks. And then students would then get themselves into teams. So we did like a little draft day. So we have the students nominate 4 people. If you get more than 4 who nominate themselves, then you have the voting process to nominate 4 coaches. And those coaches are then in charge of those teams, and then they then select their teams based on money. So you give them, so again, maths is in it, you give them an X amount of money, say $10,000, $100,000, whatever it might be, and they've got to buy their players. So of course they're trying to spend money on the best players, so they perceive as the better players, but they have to spread that money out. So they might have to put rules in place, but I found they didn't really have to, because someone would go, and everyone got an opportunity to go up on that as well. So the first person would say, I want Amy, and so then, and I'm going to give Amy, I've got a $100,000 budget, I'm going to give Amy $80,000. And so the next person goes, no, pass, I don't want Amy. The next person then goes, yeah, I'll go 81,000. Then the next person goes, no, I don't want Amy either. So then you then go back to get one more opportunity to go above. And if they decide they want to go over 81,000, then they might go, yeah, I'm going to get 90,000. Then this person says, yeah, I'm going to go above that, then they win it. So what happens is you end up with that really good player in that team, but they've got no money left to go and buy anyone else. So the team ends up becoming very even. So you end up with some teams which have got really good players and poor players, and you've got people who are very even across the board. But either way, it makes it very even and very even competition. And no one feels like, in my experience, like they've missed out and like they'll pick last because they were no good. And the other thing too is, because there's all these other roles, those who aren't so good at sport end up naturally wanting to take on the other roles, and they find like that they really like those roles. So for example, once you've got your teams, and it might be 4 teams of 5 for 20 students obviously in the class, if that was the case, and then each person gets a role. So someone becomes, so you've got your coach, someone becomes your like they just get different things. So with the Year 10 students, they had to do all the laundry themselves. So I actually got all the uniforms out that they use for different sports that they represent in the school. And at the end of the lesson, sometime before the next lesson, they had to go up to home ec and get those washed. So in their own time, well, they were feeling an incredible sense of ownership on the program. And they would love coming down to PE, even the ones who didn't like PE, because they had their roles to do. So they would then go away, take those up to home ec, they'd get them washed, they'd pick them up, like at the end of the school day or whatever, and then they'd drop them back to me, and then I'd put them back in the cupboard so they're ready, whenever it might be. They do it in their own time. But it takes a bit of work in the beginning to set it up, like the first 2 to 3 weeks. But after that, like as a teacher, you practically just sit there and you don't have to, you just kind of like the facilitator, but you do very little because they're also motivated to do it themselves. So everyone has to have an opportunity to officiate, so referee a game. So if you're doing basketball, say for example, every person has a go at umpiring. So you'll have like, okay, we've got Team A versus Team B, and Team C is the team that's umpiring this game, and then Team D is the team which is in charge of like scoreboard. So someone has to be, so everyone gets a go at being on the scoreboard. So you have the sheet, you tick off names every time they've done a roll, and you go, oh, this person hasn't had a turn. You'll find some kids just want to keep doing the scoreboard, some kids just want to keep doing refereeing because they'll love it. But so long, that's fine, so long as everyone gets to have an opportunity to have at least one go. And so you've then got the scoreboard happening, and at the end of that, then it's the scoreboard person's responsibility to then get the best players from that game, from the umpire. So the referee then goes, okay, I'm going to give 3 points to this person, 2 points to this person, 1 point to this person. At the end of the whole big competition, you have like a Brownlow medal thing, like they do in AFL, and all the votes go up. So you go round one, and you have students writing up on the board, and I'll be sitting at the side, going round 1, 3 votes, S. Smith, 2 votes, whatever. If you've got heaps, then you might need to get it done ahead of time, and you might just go through just the last round. But they find it really exciting to do that and read out what the votes are, and they see all their points go up, and then that student ends up becoming like the best and fairest or whatever for that competition. But it is such a good program because it doesn't only promote participating in sport in terms of the physical side of it, but participating as a coach or as an official in some respect, whether that's scoring or timekeeping also doing the scoreboard, or umpiring. And then of course they had a ladder as well, which I would take away. I'd take away the scores and then put it into the ladder and then update it, and it would always be on the wall in the gym. It was because it was a high school at the time, but you could do a similar thing with your classroom, and you have your ladder up, and who's playing next week or whatever. But you could then incorporate so many different things from that. You could then get kids going out and getting sponsorship, writing sponsorship letters, and particularly in the primary school, it'd be very easy, much easier to do that because you've got the students with you all the time. That sponsorship money could then go towards buying trophies. Like we actually purchased trophies out of the budget in the first year I did it, and kids actually got a little trophy for being. So the winning team got a trophy, and I think the best and the MVP or whatever we called it got a trophy. And then I think they also voted like a player's player or something. So it was just the best player according to whatever rules we'd set, which was of course set up as a way of doing it. So it wasn't just like the best player getting it, like it was the one that kind of just did all the work behind the scenes, who was always doing the washing and making sure things were working. And it was typically someone who wasn't good at sport, but they ended up loving sport as a result because they could see that there was just so many areas that they could be involved in. All right, so I'll just read through these. So you are responsible for teaching students how to think critically as a teacher. It's really important that you recognise that. There's some stuff on Merman that you read through where it's becoming more and more important that the teacher does it than the parent. It's such a good opportunity as a teacher to develop critical thinking, and you guys are the ones with the training. But a lot of parents don't have this sort of training like you do in an education degree. I was going to ask how you do this, but we won't go into too much. We've only got 15 minutes left, so I think we'll leave that unless you want to talk about how you could potentially develop critical thinking. I think we've spoken about it enough, how you do it in art, how you do it in PE. You need to be open and responsive to new perspectives, and that's kind of answering that question, how you would teach students how to think creatively, but also, as I showed earlier, how to problem solve, be innovative. So talking to students about how to deliver and receive feedback. So again, that's right at the alley of the CPET program. But it's really important that you talk to students about how to deliver feedback to somebody in a positive way, and how sometimes being negative is not always a bad thing. People talk about being constructive feedback or constructive criticism, but pointing out that negative feedback is not always a bad thing. It might not feel good. It's actually quite important, and it would be worthwhile looking up research on that, on how important negative feedback is. You don't want to get it all the time, it doesn't feel great, but how you deal with that is an important skill to have. So, and the best way to teach that, apart from talking about it, is to demonstrate it yourself. So what you demonstrate in your own behaviours is what kids are going to pick up, but also pointing it out, because a lot of kids, a lot of adults even, won't even recognise it. So if you point it out, then of course it's going to be easier for the kids to learn it. So you being open and responsive to new perspectives, you delivering feedback in a positive way, but also talking about how to take negative feedback, but also deliver constructive feedback, and how they can view failure. So Ken Robinson talked about it a fair bit, how people don't want to fail, and the whole system right through up until university is all about pass or fail. And you get an F, it means you failed in class, or you get an E, means you failed. D is marginal, and so on. But just how the education system has been set up for the Industrial Revolution of the early 1900s, and we still have so much of that impacting the education system today. But definitely how you view failure, and it might be this through storytelling is the best. And one of the things I like about Ken Robinson is he gives a lot of stories, and it's the best way to learn anything, because you kind of become engaged in it, and you can picture it in your own mind. You can empathise with the situation, and you can relate it back to your own personal experiences. So if you failed in something on the weekend, pointing it out to students in class and saying, this is what happened and I failed, but does that mean that I failed? And we could talk forever and a day about how if you don't, failing is really only if you don't get up and try again. Okay, so the discussion board, I wanted to just talk through these, and I think we will spend 5 to 10 minutes talking about these just quickly, and then they're there for you to go and jump on the discussion board. Has anyone written these yet for Module 2 on the discussion board? No. So how do other curriculum areas develop critical thinking skills? Pretty much what that's getting at is arts is a way that can develop critical thinking in a way that no other curriculum area can. So I want you to consider how the other areas do, but recognise that it's probably, even without being into art myself, it's probably still a biased opinion that no other, because I'm teaching this unit, no other curriculum area can develop critical thinking in the way that arts can, and also the way that PE can. How will you use arts to develop well-being in your students? So I want you to consider that. And how have your art experiences developed your critical thinking, problem solving, creativity and innovation skills? So if you just spend a couple of minutes on that, do you agree with me that no other curriculum area can develop critical thinking in the way that arts can, or do you think that there's a subject that can do it better?
I think it depends on what you're teaching anyway, I guess.
Mm.
I think that with the arts, because it's such a broad topic, it includes dance, drama, music, visual arts, and now multimedia digital arts. There's so much more spec for developing critical thinking skills. If you're just looking at mathematics, for example, yes, there's critical thinking. You can always ask the child, what if you did it this way, how else can you think of it? Same with science, there's a lot of big unanswerable questions in science. But because the arts covers so many more things, it opens a child's thinking abilities visually, spatially, physically. in a lot more ways than what would be traditionally critical thinking, for example, mathematics or science.
I think in terms of looking at the world through a lens of a critical thinker, arts probably does a lot better job in that it takes into account emotions as well and social interactions and how that affects, what's created and what you see, what you don't see. Whereas if it's maths, you think about a problem, or science, what you know and what you don't know. And in that aspect, you're thinking critically in terms of how you can do things or what you know and what you don't know. Whereas arts will take into consideration the emotions, all those sort of interactions. Whereas that's one way it's unique.
Yeah.
It's interpreted differently. Whereas most you've got the you have to find it. Whereas arts, you can see it in
But in a way, there is a way that is similar, like I only realised this recently, is that art is very with sort of performing arts where you use your body or painting work, depending on the technique, how you, whether it's arm or I think wrist movements. I'm not 100% on the terms. It's using your body, but with maths, a lot of the problems started off with just basic problems as well, like things that they had to be able to do with their body. Well, not necessarily with their body, but practical use, I think. It's what's the term? Rope stretching for trigonometry, Pythagorean theorems. Yeah. So, in that way, they kind of connect as well.
Yeah. All right. And last one, same thing with PE. Consider how does the PE teacher engage students in critical thinking, problem solving, creativity and innovation? And what are your views of the HP curriculum according to the current Australian curriculum, and what do you think it will look like in the future? So first of all, how can the PE teacher engage students in critical thinking?
You know what I really don't like about schools? Well, all 3 schools that I've been to on placement, the teacher, the classroom teacher, does not teach arts and PE. They just, they teach the core subjects and they go to specialist teachers for science as well. I think that's so boring.
For the classroom teacher or for the...
Yeah, I think it's boring for the classroom teacher. Because you don't get to be the fun one.
Well then that's perfect for you to go and become a specialist teacher. If you find those subjects more interesting, then apply for a job as a specialist.
Well, what's interesting is that in one of my placements where that was the situation where the main classroom teacher didn't do performing arts or visual arts with the students actually acted up on the specialist teacher compared to their regular classroom teacher. They would seem to still have fun, even though they were they would be motivated for the main classroom teacher. So the specialist teacher, they sort of just acted up, even though it's considered fun. Every area has fun in a way. They would act up for the specialist teacher, but not for the main classroom teacher. And it was just,
I found the students I had acted up in different ways. So the students acted up in one way for the classroom teacher and acted up in a different way for the specialist teacher. So it wasn't that they weren't acting up for the classroom teacher, it's just that they knew more about what boundaries they had. I don't know, it's just maybe they had different boundaries in the classrooms or something.
Yeah, different expectations too is, particularly for primary school kids, is pretty hard, and even more so for younger the early years, that teachers are different and they let different things go. But if you've got an interest if you are a classroom teacher and you've got an interest in something, or whether it's visual art or dance, drama, PE, there's no reason why you couldn't incorporate more of that, because that's your flair, and you could incorporate more of that into your teaching. And just last of all, on what you think it will look like in the future, Ken Robinson talked about in the video, we don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years, let alone in 15, 20 years. And the students that you guys are going to be teaching, this is primary school, so they're going to be somewhere that most likely the students you're going to be teaching are going to be aged between 8 and 12, or grade 3 and grade 6. And so they're not going to be finishing school until potentially 2025. So think about that. So you're doing teacher training now to become a teacher, to work with students who are going to be going to the workforce in about 2025. If you were to start teaching next year and they're about grade 6, it could be longer, it could be 2030. What do you think the health and physical education curriculum will look like in 2025? And what do you think you need to do now to develop kids, whether it's for PE or art or any other subject, for the world in another 7 years? Because think about it, the iPhone has only been around for 7 to 10 years. It's just freaky to think that there's kids now, all of my kids were born and they were with an iPhone in their hand, it's just there. It was there to be able to, they can unlock my phone. They know the passcode and they can unlock my phone and get into it and use it. And I didn't even know what a smartphone was until 2005 or whatever, when they were developed. So consider what the education system will look like in another 7 years, and what the world will look like that you're developing students for. You're developing students right now for a world that's going to look very different by 2030.
I think there'll be more focus on that. So if you do classes that incorporate technology, I think there'll be more focus on that than that's what I think. My child is, my children are all technology. When they were fun, turn on a DVD player and you have a DVD in and play. My mum had absolutely no idea how to do it. It's really so I think anyway, that the kids are going to be more focused on how technology, they could sit here and use a mouse and interact with the teacher, but interact on the smartphone.
Yeah.
You could say that with any generation as new technologies come out. My grandparents wouldn't necessarily have had record players, but my parents grew up with record players and loved record players. So you could almost say that with each new generation there's new developments, and you could say, sure, my parents were born with a record player.
And so you could expect that they're going to be these gun record player users.
Yeah.
But instead, they then moved on to cassette tapes and then CD players and DVD and Blu-rays kind of figured it out, didn't it? But sitting here now with laptops in front of you, laptops might not even exist in another 10 years. They might be replaced by some other technology which is developed. It may be that students... exactly.
We don't ever
glasses that you wear. You just put the glasses on and there you are in class. And maybe you don't even have to come to class. It's already happening in tertiary education. Pardon?
I think people always need to attend to class, because a parent can't stay at home with their child and do work and the child studying at the same time. They might have their own babysitters by then. Hopefully she has a child.
So consider that. I find it just mind-boggling. All right. Thank you.